so much for being here this morning for the fourth quarter meeting of the Principal Advisory Council. I am Jenny Ray, and I will be your liaison for this meeting. And also behind the scenes, we also have from our P3 team, Paul Prater, who will be the note taker, and Stacy Noah will monitor the chat room as well. So welcome, everyone. At this time, I would like to introduce Kevin Brown, the interim commissioner, and he will provide our welcome. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank all of you for joining today. I know this is a time filled with a lot of anxiety. It's very appropriate that we have this advisory. It helps us as we continue to provide guidance to school districts, as you all will strive yet again to educate, feed, and support your students, just as you did at the close of last year during a global pandemic. I think we all thought, and at least I thought at the beginning of the pandemic, this would be something that would pass and we'd get to Derby Day and everything would return to normal. Unfortunately, we know that's not the case. And we're going to be starting school yet again in a global pandemic. However, as you've heard me say, and I'm biased in a way, but I also have evidence on my side that of all the states, I believe we have the staff to do this and to do it right. And so I have the utmost confidence in you and in your teams. And I know Dr. Glass, our incoming commissioner, I've already had a lot of conversations with him. One of the reasons he wanted to come home to Kentucky is the reputation that Kentucky has for the teachers and the leaders, and to be able to be involved in that yet again. So you will be led by Dr. Glass starting September 14th, and we're already having a good transition. So I just want to remind you, this is an advisory, and an advisory means while you are going to hear information from us, and we have to have that for you, a little bit of sit and get, this is for us to hear from you based on your expertise. We need to hear maybe some things that we haven't thought of that you come across your mind when you're viewing the presentations, questions you may have, issues that are coming in your district that we may not have encountered yet here at the state level that we need to think about. So please make your voices heard. I know this group will not have a problem doing that, but we are here to hear from you. These recordings and the minutes just don't gather dust. We actually have a feedback loop. And so all feedback and advice from advisories goes back to our leadership team here at the department, also filters over to the State Board of Education as they are considering regulations. And so we highly value that. Your feedback comes by you talking, of course, raising your hand or talking and asking questions or comments and feedback, but also if you're leaving information in the chat, and also your exit slip is very helpful to us. Again, those just don't go off into the netherworld. We use all that information as our evidence for feedback. So please take advantage of that. I'm going to be able to be with you today until 11:30. I think you're going to go until noon, and you've got a heavy agenda, packed agenda, but we have a internal staff meeting to get ready for the state board meeting in August at 11:30. So I'll be on here until then, and we'll be listening and taking notes. And just a reminder, it's recorded, and Dr. Glass probably will also be watching this at some point. So you're going to enjoy, as I said before, working with him. So welcome. Thank you for your work. And just know that we are thinking of you and are here for you to support you as you begin this new and unprecedented school year.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. At this time, we will have a roll call. So if you would unmute your microphone and enable your camera in order to introduce yourself, you can name your school, of course, and your district as you introduce yourself. So we'll just go down in alphabetical order. Josh Blevins had already let me know that he was not going to be able to be here today. He's also taken a new position that is not a principal. He's in the district office now, so he won't be a part of our group moving forward, but we congratulate him on his new role. Okay, Lester. Let's see, Lester, are you here? It looks like he is here. All right. Lester, we'll come back to you. Melanie Irwin? Michael Goodnow? Melanie, is that you?
Yes, good morning. Melanie
morning.
Irwin, Beth County High School.
Michael? Tamala? Tamala had thought she might be able to join for a while this morning, but she has a district meeting also going on. So she didn't know if she would be able to join at some point, but she might not be here right at this moment. Jennifer Hutchison?
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Hutchison. I'm at Picketum Elementary School in Fayette County.
Brian? Michael Kelly?
Hi, I'm Mike Kelly, principal at Valley High School in Jefferson County Public Schools.
Robert King? Let's see, Darla Payne?
Good morning, Starla Payne, principal of Ackerman Middle School in Boone County.
Lisa Purdue?
Hello, Lisa, Cumberland County Elementary School.
Kim Rice?
Good morning, it's Kim Rice. I'm the principal of the Academy at Shawnee in Jefferson County.
Michelle Ritchie?
Good morning, Michelle Ritchie, principal of Perry Central High School, Perry District.
Toya Roby?
Good morning, Toya Roby. I'm facing one way, the monitor's this way. Good morning, Toya Roby, Kentucky School for the Deaf.
And Jerry Rowland?
Hello, representing Kentucky Tech at Monroe County Area Technology Center.
Welcome, Jerry. Peggy Sinclair Morris?
Hi, good morning, Peggy. I'm Peggy Sinclair Morris, and I'm the new principal at the Kentucky School for the Blind.
Welcome. Shervita West Jordan? All right, and Lester, were you able to unmute this morning?
I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
All right. Lester Diaz, principal at Frederick Douglass High School in Lexington, Kentucky. Thank you, and sorry for my technical difficulties.
No problem. Thank you so much. Was there anyone else who needed to be recognized this morning if your name was not called? Please take this time to unmute your mic. Okay, thank you very much. This morning, if you would please digitally sign in by accessing our PrAC work site. That link was in the calendar invitation that you have. So sometime during the meeting or even after the meeting, that is how we also keep track of who attends our meetings. So if you would just go to the PrAC work site and then scroll down to digitally check in. Also at this time, we will call for an agenda approval. So also within the link that you received, you had a link to the agenda in the PrAC site. If you haven't already, if you would scroll down to the agenda section and click on the July 22nd document. And then we will need to have a motion to accept the agenda.
This is Jennifer Hutchison. I motion to accept the agenda.
Lester Diaz, I second.
Thank you. And if there are any nays to this, if you would unmute your mic and let us know or put in the chat box. Otherwise, silence will confirm approval or consensus. Okay, thank you. Also, our minutes are and our meeting summary from the third quarter meeting is also in the same place on the PrAC worksite. If you would scroll down to the meeting summary section, click on the April 22nd document. Those are our meeting minutes, and I hope you've had time to look at those as well. And then we will need to have a motion for approval and a second as well.
Jennifer Hutchison, motion to approve.
Lisa Purdue, second.
Thank you. Also, if anyone disapproves or if you find something that needs to be changed, if you would unmute and let us know at this time or put it in the chat box. Silence will be recognized as consensus for approval. Okay, thank you. At this time, we will have some information regarding the facilities guidance, and Kay Kennedy from the Office of Finance and Operations from the Kentucky Department of Education will be here to lead through some information, and Paul Prater will provide the guiding question in the chat box as well. So Kay, I welcome you. Would you like for me to click for you, or
yes.
would you?
If
Okay,
you
I'm
would,
glad to do so.
And then I will actually share my screen in a bit, but if you can start us off with the next slide, that would be great. I think I have another slide. Do I? Yeah.
Yes.
Kay,
Okay.
before you start, and Kay's used to me interrupting her before her presentations. I'll try not to steal your thunder this time, Kay.
Hey, you take off, Kevin. That's great.
I just want to remind everyone on all of your agenda items that you're going to be hearing about guidance. I believe for almost all of them the guidance documents have been issued. In an ideal scenario, we would have had all these advisory meetings before guidance was issued. We don't have that luxury in a time of an emergency. And so sometimes we've been able to get before advisory groups before we issued the guidance. Other times we just don't have that time. And particularly when we're rotating, we have a superintendent advisory rotates every other week between the task force. And sometimes they get it ahead of time, sometimes they get it after. My point being, just because we've issued the guidance related to COVID in all these areas, that does not mean that it's written in stone. We want to hear from you about things that we may not have thought of. And you've heard the governor say on his press conferences about the healthy at work guidance, for example. That has changed multiple times, and that's why employers have to keep referencing that website, because as the virus changes, as the situation on the ground changes, this guidance can also possibly change. Now, also that, it could create more confusion for you, but we also want to be able to be responsive. So just want you to know that your guidance and advice to us is essential, even though the majority of these documents have already been issued. We're still evaluating them to making sure we're addressing the needs that you have, and they are subject to change. Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. Today, as we have our conversation, you do have the guiding question, and I would like to reiterate what Kevin said. These are living, breathing documents, and any suggestions, anything we left out, anything we missed in terms of what needs to be done in your school facilities to best prepare them for students in the fall, please share that with us. And if you don't feel comfortable with a question or concern on this call in this Teams meeting, please feel free to reach out either to me or Associate Commissioner Robin Kinney or Kevin. However you can get the message to us, that would be great. Next slide, please. The document for reopening schools, considerations for facilities, actually came out in June on June 29th. And if you've not had a chance to read it, I would encourage you to do so. And in a highlight, since the document really addresses these major dot points: cleaning and sanitization, facility utilization, your building systems, emergency drills, and operations. And so at this time, I'm going to share my screen and just point out to you a few things that will be important for you to review in this document. Can you see the considerations for opening schools document, facilities and logistics at this time? Is that coming through?
Yes.
Great, awesome. As you look at the document, you will notice that there are embedded links that will refer you to those resources that we consider to be authoritative on a particular issue. We do look to the CDC to provide guidance in a lot of areas that are related to facilities. And the first one we'll look at is cleaning and sanitization. The general CDC guidance is found on the CDC website, and you can just click this link and it will take you right to that spot. If you have a confirmed case of COVID-19 within a site, here's the direct link to the CDC website on additional cleaning and disinfection that needs to occur when you actually have a confirmed case of COVID-19. So we try to provide these direct links to give you access to the authoritative source. We do recommend that each building administrator complete an inventory of the spaces within your facility to determine what custodial guidelines need to be in place for the type of service that's needed in that space, the frequency of service for that space, what product or products should be used in that space, and any other instructions relative to particular areas of concern in that space. We did include a model template for this assessment in the Appendix A that you are certainly free to utilize and adapt to your own needs. But we think it's important to have that custodial checklist, not only for the fact that you've done due diligence to look at your spaces, but also in the event that you have a sub custodian in the building for a particular length of time, you already got great documentation to help that person understand what their responsibilities are in their substitute role for that particular period of time. And I've been in enough school buildings to know that many of you already utilize this technique to give your staff the ability to be accountable for their responsibilities. But in this time of pandemic, if there is additional work that needs to be done, it's good to document that and make sure that those areas are being covered as they should be. We also want you to take into consideration any additional PPE that staff may need. Some of the products that are used in sanitization and disinfection are a little bit stronger than what your normal cleaning products might be. So just be cognizant of that and make sure that if there are gloves or eye protection that needs to be available for your staff, that you've got that covered. There is also a link to guidance for PPE that's provided by OSHA, and we've included that link here as well. One of the things that obviously you have to consider when we talk about the world of COVID-19 is that concept of social distancing. A key mitigation strategy is to maintain the 6-foot social distancing, and how does that impact your ability to utilize the spaces in your building? So we've included a table here that will show you particular room sizes and how you might consider the capacity of those spaces as you look at either a 6-foot circle or an 8x8 block, however you choose to social distance. And we also have what we call a room capacity calculator embedded link here that will go back to a spreadsheet. And if I can just click on this for just a second, we'll take a look at that room capacity calculator. It is an Excel spreadsheet that allows you to actually input the square footage of the room and the percent of usable space in that room. As you know, classrooms have certain spaces occupied by tables or desks or chairs or other furniture that decreases the space utilization. But for example, you can put in the fact that you may have an 800 square foot room and that you can utilize 80% of that space. And then if you are trying to use a socially distanced model of a 6 foot circle, you could get 23 students in there at that 80% usable space capacity. So I'd just like to refer you to that tool. You can use it for your cafeteria. Let's say you have a 3,000 foot cafeteria and you can use 75% of the space. How many students should you expect to be in there at a particular time? And that gives you just an idea of where you can start your planning process to be able to utilize that. Okay. So back to the document. Also, in terms of space utilization, there are other enhancements that we want you to consider for mitigation strategies. I'm sure you've already considered how you're going to be able to implement these. Multiple hand sanitizer stations, plexiglass shields in public-facing spaces. Here you would think of the reception area or the cafeteria cashier worker may need to have that protection if you can afford that. I would like to also point out that there is signage available from the CDC free of charge that stresses many of these mitigation strategies. You can print those off, laminate them, put them in a plastic sheet, whatever works to make sure that you are communicating to your folks what you expect. The last dot point that I'd like to talk about here is with respect to the water fountain. The CDC encourages you to use, I think they're called filling stations, rather than have students drink directly from a water fountain. So to the extent that you have those available, that would be great, and you could turn off the water fountain. That's the best scenario. You may not be able to turn off the water fountain though, so just be careful that you restrict its use. The next topic refers to building systems, and the major building system that we think you will want to consider as you look at the impact of COVID-19 is your HVAC. We do have a link to the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, known as ASHRAE. They've provided a couple of statements relative to your HVAC systems and how that can work to your advantage to help mitigate the transmission of COVID-19. There's no one answer for that since there are so many different systems available, but we do encourage you to feel free to contact your HVAC engineers who may be able to offer you guidance. There are basically three strategies to consider. One is dilution. You could look at filtration, and then finally at purification. So there may be some financial restrictions on being able to utilize some of these strategies, but we offer those for your consideration. The next point of discussion is the emergency response drills that are required. The Kentucky Center for School Safety has provided us with this update, and I believe they have communicated separately with district administrators about how to conduct fire drills, lockdown drills, your tornado drills, earthquake drills, any of the safety drills that do need to occur and how they might occur during this time of pandemic where folks need to be socially distant. How can you communicate that information so that your students are safe in that respect, yet keeping them in a healthy and safe environment? So we have that for your consideration as well. And then as building principals, you're very much cognizant of the traffic that goes on around your building and drop off and dismissal. You may need to consider that there will be different transportation needs of students. Now there may be fewer bus riders, more car riders. You may need to consider different access and egress options to get students into your buildings as quickly and safely as possible. So make sure you consider that. In terms of student arrival, one thing you want to try to keep in mind is how to mitigate any bottlenecks that may occur because you are doing temperature checks at the entrance to the building, and how you can either stagger those or open multiple entryways to be able to process those kids through. In terms of taking temperatures, there is a little bit of flexibility on where that can occur. If students can be checked either at the arrival to on board at the bus, that will save you from having to do that at entry into the building. You may want to just have all students screened as they enter the building. Again, that's up to you what will work best. We've often referred to the implementation of metal detectors that they implemented in Fayette County as to how best to herd students through a process like temperature checks to avoid bottlenecks and to be able to keep them socially distant, safe, as well as to get that health screening done. At dismissal time, please consider how you can do that without having students congregate in large groups. You may need to stagger those times to eliminate those bottlenecks. Finally, in terms of logistics, the building security does need to be considered, as the CDC has recommended, improving ventilation by opening doors and windows. And we know, based on discussions with Security Marshal Wilcox, that we do want to be very cognizant of locking doors while instruction occurs. But then again, being able to keep those doors and windows or being able to open the doors and windows between classes or after school to get the ventilation working in our favor to address the COVID-19. Okay, finally, here's the appendix, the sample site inventory for your particular building. You would list all the sites, what type of service, frequency, products, etc. And then finally, here's an example of a custodial checklist. I'm sure that many of you already have something similar to this in place. So just want you to have the ability to utilize that if it's helpful for you. So at this time, I will, are we going to take a few questions or wait till the end? I'm not sure how you want to proceed at this point.
Absolutely, we can take questions.
Great. And I'm going to give my screen back to you. If you don't have a particular question now, please feel free to drop me a line, give me a phone call, something like that. We certainly are interested in your feedback. We know that there will be a heightened emphasis on cleaning and sanitization. We've had discussions about, what does that level need to be, on the playground? What does that level need to be, when I've got kids that are typically used to, sitting on the reading rug, or they have, how many students do I let go to the restroom at a time? So there's just the whole host of questions that come up, and we're happy to try to entertain those.
So also, our guiding question is what needs to be done in school facilities to best prepare them for students. So what feedback, actionable feedback might you have around facilities, around this facilities guidance? I encourage you to unmute your microphone or to respond in the chat box. Okay. All right. Well, we'll just continue to move on. But if at any time you think of a question around any of the topics that we've covered today, at any time, please post that question in the chat box, and we will be sure to address that question. If we don't have answers, then we will get back to you with those answers. So encourage you for your feedback.
And feedback's the key there. It does not have to be a question. It can be, we certainly will take questions, but it can be things you may think that we have have gotten it wrong, or things we've missed. So any type of feedback, we want to hear from you, including questions.
Okay, well, we will move forward at this time with food service guidance with Lauren Moore, who's the director, and Katie Embry, the manager of the Division of School and Community Nutrition Office of Finance and Operations from the Kentucky Department of Education. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I am happy to be here with you all. Good morning. First, I will state the guiding question that will also be in the chat. It is, what factors should KDE consider when assisting with preparation for food service? You can move on to the next slide. Thank you. And just very briefly, I would like to just give some information about the positive impact that the child nutrition programs have had for Kentucky's children and families since March. These areas, or these items here, list all of the positive impact, starting with the Pandemic Electronic Benefit Transfer Program. That is a SNAP type benefit that was available to students who had access to free or reduced price meals. This assists families with grocery purchases, and to date there have been over 530,000 students who have received these benefits, which total over $165 million in Kentucky. We also have 20 districts continuing to participate in the Baylor University Emergency Meals to You program. This program provides families in 20 participating districts 10 days worth of meals by mail every 2 weeks, and the program will continue through August 15th. Summer meal programs continue to operate in many districts, most of our districts throughout the state. And then finally, 88% of our National School Lunch Program sponsors have at least some level of participation in the Community Eligibility Program, or CEP. 76% of those sponsors have full participation. And what this means is that all schools in 76% of our school districts provide meals at no cost to their students. Districts that are eligible but do not currently participate still have until August 31st to elect participation for the upcoming school year. Next slide, please. So the initial guidance that came out on June 22nd about food service is focused on in-person food service for students. This is what our focus will be on today, but I did want to note that we have received meal program waivers from the Department of Agriculture, and we will be releasing, just next week actually, we will be releasing off-site food service guidance for students who will be participating in non-traditional instruction for all or a portion of their learning experience when school begins. Next slide, please. So the initial food service document focuses on 4 areas of consideration that are listed here. They are meal service environment, the meal pattern, food safety planning, and operational support. Again, just a note before I turn this over, I'm going to turn this over to Katie Embry. She's our school's program manager. But just another note to be watching for the guidance that will come out next week about off-site food service. We will have a webcast that will take place. We have a webinar scheduled for Thursday with our food service directors to discuss off-site food service, and then it will also be, it's also scheduled to be on next Tuesday's superintendent's webcast. So Katie, I will turn it over to you to go into detail a little more about these areas.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Next slide, please. Again, we will talk about food service operations inside the building today, but in most cases, many districts will be running both models, in person and off-site meal service at the same time. So today we will start with the meal service environment considerations inside the building. To start your plan, you need to identify meal service locations in the building and the service methods that can be utilized. Can you serve meals in classrooms or other large open areas that provide enough space for social distancing? Can students easily pick up grab and go type meals to help with meal delivery? And can meal schedule times be adjusted to allow for cafeteria use with reduced capacity? During a single meal service period, multiple meal service methods may be utilized with different groups of children in the same school building. Next slide. Other considerations. After locations and food delivery methods are identified, consideration should be made for the logistics of the meal service. What equipment is available, supplies or other resources are needed or are available or need to be ordered so that that meal service method can be utilized. Stagger meal service periods so that arrival and dismissal times limit the amount of contact between students in high traffic areas. Ensure that there's adequate time to allow for proper sanitation between the use of tables and other services when multiple groups of students might, where multiple groups of students might consume meals. And also it will be important to eliminate self-service stations or the sharing of any food between students. Food service staff must also be mindful of following proper procedures to ensure student safety as well as their own. Staff will use temperature checks and complete any employee health screening according to district protocol upon arrival at the workplace. Staff who develop symptoms during the workday shall follow the district's policy for illness, and staff will wear face masks unless a medical exemption has been granted. Food service staff, as well as any other staff member in the building, may be highly susceptible to the illness. Therefore, it's important to keep a culture of safety amongst all staff. Next slide. Thank you. There's also meal pattern considerations. All meal pattern requirements must be met in order to receive reimbursement for meals. Consideration should be given to the meal service method selected and the equipment that is available. Is there enough hot, cold holding equipment for transporting and serving meals in alternate locations? Do staff have enough time for prep work? Or is there a need to purchase food items that are less labor intensive? Also with accommodations, whenever supported by proper documentation, accommodations must be provided to ensure equal access to the program. Meals must be served in a manner that offers a safe environment for children with food allergies, and all staff must work together to make sure that there is clear communication on how to provide safe meals. Next slide, please.
There's considerable lag time between clicking. No, that's fine.
You also, in each school site, there needs to be food safety considerations. Each school and feeding site is required to have an individualized written food safety plan. Ensure all food safety plans include standard operating procedures for any new meal service methods or newly added procedures that are in place due to COVID. Make sure that all food service staff, as well as anyone potentially involved in serving meals, is aware of and has received training on the standard operating procedures. All staff must have knowledge of and training on relevant SOPs for their job with an extra emphasis on SOPs for hand washing, proper glove use, personal hygiene, serving safe food to students with food allergies, cleaning and sanitizing, and the district's food service health policy. Finally, the operational support considerations. Clearly written operational policies and procedures must be developed and implemented for food service. Food service staff must be knowledgeable about the procedures, and coordination and communication must occur between food service staff, the building administration, and all other building staff. Lastly, it's so important to reach out and communicate to households. It's imperative that the student household know and understand how to communicate and interact with the child nutrition program. What methods will be used for communications? Automated calls, email, district website, or social media? In schools that don't participate in CEP, how will parents or guardians know how to complete a household application? Also, what will be the policies on a la carte or vending machines? Those will need to be communicated as well. And finally, KDE has several resources that are available to you. We held a webinar on June 25th, and that recording is available. Also, we have dedicated staff members who are ready to assist if you need anything. And as Lauren said, we will have a webinar tomorrow, Thursday at 2 o'clock, and that will be recorded and available for you as well. So please let us know if you have any questions.
So at this time, if you have questions or if you would like to give some actionable feedback regarding this guidance information, we welcome you to unmute or use the chat box as well.
Jenny, we have had some questions and comments in the chat box. It's mostly regarding facilities and dealing with temperature checks. I don't know if you want to talk about them at this point or carry it over to the end, but there are several things in the chat.
I think we could go ahead and address some of those.
This is Kay. I was just typing out a response, but I'm happy to address them, online or either way. It's fine with me. There's a question or actually a comment from a principal communicating to parents about arrival will be a huge part and we'll definitely need to retrain them on times. That is a very true statement. In fact, we've had some conversation with Centers for School Safety that children who typically arrive before the building is open, or even you have staff available to supervise them, has been a concern in the past, and I think is even more so now. So to the extent that you can communicate with your families about the need for trying to adhere to those times, or if you have the ability to utilize some flexibility in staff time who can help monitor those early arrivals, that would be the ideal situation. But you're absolutely correct, that is a huge concern. The next question in the chat is about doing temperature checks and monitoring students, with that same concern about the drop-offs before teachers arrive, you probably can't stop that from happening, that the parent has to drop them off on the way to work, or there's really no good alternative there. But so think about that in advance, and like I said, if you have the ability to use some flexible staff time that you can get those kids taken care of, that would be ideal. The next question, do you advise that small group tables not be utilized by teachers to meet with 1 or 2 students and removed from classrooms? So again, this is all about how do you best utilize the space and still have the ability to deliver instruction. And I've seen those small tables and kids gathered around them, either doing reading or manipulatives or whatever. So the mitigation strategies work together. So in the event that you have students who aren't able to be socially distanced, then you have to utilize, the face mask strategy, or, if you have other techniques in mind. So if the table is actually equipped for 4 or 5 students to be sitting around this table working with the teacher, and you can drop that back to 1 or 2 and have them on separate ends, and if you can reduce the contact time, excuse me, if you can reduce the contact time, that's also a helpful mitigation strategy. So before I removed the tables from consideration for use in instruction this year, I would think about if there are ways that you could mitigate the techniques that you're going to use in your instruction. So if you could restrict it to 1 or 2 students, if you could utilize masks in that situation, which makes sense, then I certainly would encourage you to think through that. I don't think I would recommend to throw them out immediately. There's been a confusion in our district regarding the use of common areas for student arrival. Can use places like the gymnasium utilized in the morning during arrival? Social distancing will be monitored by the school staff. I've talked to a couple of superintendents about this. I think as long as students have a specific place where they are supposed to go, and we talk about knowing, where students and staff are for purposes of contact tracing. Who has that student come in contact with for the longest period of time impacts the risk that the student poses if they should turn out to be COVID positive. So if you've got a signed location in that large area where this child will go and sit and it not be a place to congregate in small groups, et cetera, I'm confident you can make that work. But again, the key is, do you have enough people to supervise that? And hopefully the kids understand how important it is to, maintain that social distance and not utilize that as a, free recess period or something like that. So I definitely think you can do that. Any guidance or suggestions regarding duty-free lunch coverage if students are eating in the classroom? So again, I've had some conversation with a couple of superintendents about some things they were thinking about. One is to actually split up the time of the lunch, split up the last period before lunchtime. I want to make sure I say this right to try to explain the situation. Let's say you have the students, I don't know, the period before lunch, and then typically you would go to lunch. So the thinking, as I understood it, was to divide that class into a group who could go to the cafeteria with one other teacher, and then that teacher be relieved by another teacher partway through that process. Again, I think it's doable. How it would work in your building with teachers sharing coverage, or maybe even if you could use aides to help monitor those students, I think that's possible. I don't have a one size fits all answer for that, but I definitely think that you could manage that. Now, if I'm dreaming, please push back. But what we're trying to do is offer schools as much flexibility as possible to come up with what will work best in your building.
This is Jennifer Hutchison. I posed that question, so I'll respond. We have looked at multiple scenarios at an elementary school on how to cover duty-free lunch. Typically, we're providing, one or two people providing coverage for 8 to 10 classrooms during their lunchtime. Whereas if we're in individual classrooms, how are we going to allocate staff and protect instructional time for teachers to receive their duty-free lunch, because they need it. They're going to need a break sometime during their day, and it's in statute. However, we've had recommendations of, well, special area teachers can cover. Well, special area teachers, they're still teaching 100% of their instructional time. They just may have 50% of their students. So we really struggled on a good solution here at an elementary school.
And I would like to take this opportunity to talk about the KASS. I believe I'm correct on this. KASS, and that's Jim Flynn, has an area where school districts can post their plans and other information relative to their reopening. And I would encourage, if anybody's got good options, or if you've got a solution that works, that maybe you could put it in that communal sharing space for other districts to take a look at. But if we hear of anything and anybody offers a good solution to that, we'd be happy to share that, Jennifer. definitely is a concern.
Thank you so much for your responses, Kay, and thank you for your questions as well. So we'll continue to move forward. And again, as you have questions or other feedback responses, please include those in the chat or unmute at any time. So we'll go ahead with the plan for reopening secondary CTE labs during the summer of 2020, and we welcome Tom Thompson.
Good morning. Thank you, Jenny. I'd like to start with the guiding question. So what do you feel are the biggest barriers to reopening secondary CTE spaces for completion of industry certifications and lab-based dual credit coursework? Could you change the slide, please? Thank you. So as we're reading that, if you can think, as I go through this, if you can think about some of that guiding question and some of the questions that you have toward the end, then we'll try to get those answered. This particular guidance was released on June 29th. It was shared with the superintendent's webcast on the following day. Next slide, please. It can be found on the KDE COVID-19 webpage if you want to get your hands on it. And then within the document, there are links to the Healthy at Work guidance. So as you're reading it, each time you get to a section that would refer you to that, you can click on those links. So originally, during the special superintendent's webcast on May 19th, we outlined some guidance for secondary students returning to KCTCS campuses to complete dual credit coursework through June 30th. This guidance is an extension of that, opening up secondary CTE centers, and it began on July 1st to complete some of that work. We advise that if you haven't done this, or if you're going to do this, that you kind of focus on those seniors that graduated in 2020. And since it's not a question of accountability at this point, it is a question of helping those students in current careers that they're in, or to earn an industry certification to gain a career or finish up that dual credit coursework. Next slide, please. So the guiding document is broken into 4 specific areas: general requirements, arrival and dismissal, transition between classrooms and labs, area-specific guidance. And then the area-specific guidance is broken into 3 areas: classrooms, computer labs, and the CTE lab areas. Next slide, please. So in the general requirements, of course, if you're already in the process of thinking about these things and creating your plan, we ask that you reach out to the local health department and have them review those plans. If you're just starting the process of creating those plans, then it would be nice to have them be part of that. Specifically, if you have questions about some of the topics that we've discussed earlier this morning too, it would be nice to have them to be on board with you. We want you to work closely with your designated Healthy at Work officer and ensure the development of the plan for addressing students who do test positive, and it should establish prior to reopening with input from the local health department again. Next slide, please. So we want you to prepare the plan to determine which students have the opportunity to test and complete dual credit, prioritizing graduating seniors first. And if you're in an a state-operated area technology center, we really want you to work closely with your sending districts to make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as who's going to be in the building. And then, of course, you're going to keep track of who is in the building. And when you do your Healthy at Work checks and temperature checks, so that we can kind of contribute to contract tracing if there's an issue with that. So we also want you to confirm the student willingness and the parent guardian approval if the student is under 18 years old. If they are 18 or older, we ask that they share the information with their parents to make sure that they're aware of what's going on. Next slide, please. We ask that you're scheduling students to be in compliance with the Healthy at Work guidelines. And again, there's links within the document you can click on. Anyone entering the school must complete a daily temperature and health checks, maintain daily record of all students and staff in the building, prohibit access to water fountains. And we put this in here as a reminder to make sure that you're also letting the folks know that are going to be in their testing that they're not going to have access to that, so that they can be prepared to bring their own, to make sure that they have what they need. Of course, we're going to make sure that bathroom use is limited to the social distancing guidelines and sanitization guidelines. We want to require proper hand washing and hygiene. Hand sanitizing must be required before you start any work in the facility. High-touch surfaces must be cleaned on a recurring basis. All students and staff must wear cloth masks or face coverings in accordance with CTE program safety guidelines, unless total isolation can be implemented. For example, if you're in a welding booth, in your total isolation, no one's going to be in there with you. The cloth mask is not required, but of course there is program-specific PPE that may be required for that as well. And if you're going to be up moving, so when you move, wear a mask. Another thing that I want to point out as far as the PPE for, say, and I'm going to use welding again as an example, we have concerns about flammability of some of the face masks. You can purchase face masks that are specifically made for welding that protects you from that. They are cloth. The only thing I would suggest is that you look at the governor's guidance on the face coverings to make sure that they meet that, as well as the flame retardant. We ask that you adhere to additional requirements of any of the assessment vendors. When I say assessment vendors, I'm talking about the industry certifications themselves, if there's any requirements with them. And to the greatest extent possible, keep the same group of students together as much as feasible in order to minimize any contacts with other groups. And it also helps with that contact tracing. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. So the next section is arrival and dismissal. Staff and students should remain in their vehicle and away from the entrance of the school until their designated time to arrive. And that goes back to that planning piece to make sure that you plan enough time for them to arrive and check in without having backups or lines. And in this case, you're talking about a smaller group of students, so it may not be as big a deal, but it does need to be on your mind. No more than the maximum number of people per Healthy at Work requirement should be allowed in each area at a given time. You want to make sure that you stick to that 6-foot separation for social distancing. And then think about some of the areas in career and technical education labs, like the tool room area may be very small. So you want to avoid those areas, and the instructors maybe have those tools laid out well in advance, and make sure that those tools are sanitized. Next slide, please. So transition between classrooms and labs is another section. Students will be released in small groups with instructions to maintain social distancing. Preparation will be required to ensure orderly transition. Students moving between labs will make every effort to maintain that same social distancing. And like I said earlier, if we're moving, we want our masks on. Students will be asked to inform teachers and assistants should they need to move between labs or be excused. Next slide, please. So the area-specific guidance, again, that's broken into classrooms, into computer labs, and into the CTE-specific lab areas. But for general guidance of those areas, we want to make sure that the seating is separated by at least 6 foot with designated seating label. For sanitization purposes, students may be asked to provide their own materials needed for industry certification, pencils, notebooks, calculators. But the school should be prepared to provide those sanitized materials in the event the student can't. Computer workstations, desk materials, equipment, tools, seating should be disinfected after each use. And I did have a question about some of the welding equipment, how you would sanitize that. And if it's a specific piece of equipment, the manufacturer a lot of times has guidance on how that should be sanitized or how you can clean it without damaging the equipment. So I suggest that you reach out to those manufacturers and again with your health department for some of that guidance. And then if you've got particular questions, you can reach out to me. My contact information is on here, or Leslie Slaughter. She's our executive advisor, and she will be glad to help with any questions, and I will. And if you've got any right now, we can try to answer those.
All right. Are there any questions or feedback to Mr. Thompson?
All right. Thanks, Jenny.
Yep. Thank you. At this time, we'll move to the transportation guidance, and we welcome Elisa Hanley and Kay Kennedy from the Office of Finance and Operations, again from KDE.
Thank you again. This is Kay. And what we will like you to consider today as we go through our presentation is what concerns do you have relative to the transportation of students? I've often heard it said that, you know, if as long as we can get them there and feed them and give them a place to sit, that the teachers will take care of the rest. So we consider this whole conversation around pupil transportation to be really critical to being able to deliver instruction if you've got those students coming in person. So today in our guidance, Elisa Hanley, who's our pupil transportation branch manager, is going to walk you through some specifics, but basically what we're going to cover are the pupil transportation options that are available and how these may change with our considerations around COVID-19. Next slide, please. We're also going to take a look at the mitigation strategies that have to be in place for us to utilize pupil transportation. We've had great conversation with the Department for Public Health about how the strategies interplay with each other that will allow us to maximize pupil transportation and hopefully a way that won't be too cumbersome for districts, but it will be a little bit different. Next slide, please. The number of students that we can put on the bus has been a huge concern. And again, working with DPH, we'll take a look at the risk mitigation strategies and how that works out for allowing different numbers of students on the bus. Next slide, please. And then we will wrap it up with a consideration around employee health and safety. And as you know, many of our bus drivers are retired and using this as maybe a supplemental income type situation, and they are in the vulnerable population, and how we want to keep those folks safe and make sure that that they can be there to actually do the job for us. Okay, so I think that's the end of my slides, and I am actually going to share my screen again, if that's okay.
Sure, of course.
And we will take a look at. Okay, let me know when you can see the considerations for reopening schools, pupil transportation.
I can see it.
Yay. So at this time, I'm going to turn the conversation over to Elisa Hanley, and I will drive the bus from over here, okay?
All right, thank you so much. So there's several things that we're asking districts to look at when trying to optimize the number of students on the bus. The first thing that we're asking is that the districts poll the parents to see if they're going to send their students on the bus, if they're going to drive them, or if they're going to have them walk to school. If more parents are going to drive students, then districts will need to look at the staffing that they have to ensure they have a way to control the traffic flow. Districts also need to be prepared to increase the number of riders for the first couple of weeks, looking at the number of riders after the first couple of weeks if parents become comfortable with the busing system. So this may increase the need of drivers and rerouting after the first couple of weeks. Another option for districts is to look at their bell times, to not have mixed loads of elementary, middle, and high school students on the same bus. This will help with loading from back to front and worries of where students will be sitting and with whom. Kindergartners may need closer to the front to better see them. And if you have mixed loads, it makes it a little bit difficult to do back to front. So keep in mind that kindergartners and preschools will not have masks. So again, back to front and changing bell times should help with the need for transfer points. Walking distance for older students can be increased. And for districts that pick up within a mile of the school, there are programs available through Safe Routes to School, which provide guidance on maintaining safe walking programs, which will allow younger students to walk versus being picked up by the bus. Schools can set up walking school buses where students are picked up along the mile route and walk to school with a vetted adult. What we don't want, and Kay has mentioned this before, are students crowded around the waiting area to get into the school, whether it's from cars, walking, or from the buses. Districts will need to think through the processes and implement procedures that will help them facilitate social distancing. This may mean having only 3 buses at a time unloading and taking temperatures of those students while they get off the bus and enter through one door, as car riders are getting temperatures taken at another door. Or buses are offloaded first and then car riders can enter while walkers are taken to another door. There may be several doors where staff is needed to take temperatures. Using the different strategies available in this document may also help limit the number of students in one area that need to be checked before getting into the school. So once these things are considered, there are required mitigation strategies that will need to be implemented for those riding the bus. And the first is mask wearing. All students in first grade and above will need to wear a mask unless there's a medical waiver for those students, and students will become used to wearing them as time goes on. We have asked districts to work with parents and students through the summer to acclimate them to wearing of the mask for the time that they're expected to be at the bus stop and on the bus. For some students, this may be an hour, and for other students, it may be 20 minutes or less. Seating. Districts need to load back to front, and which is why looking at bell times is so important. Younger students may end up sitting with older students in the back with the back to front loading sequence. Changing bell times will help with the mixed loading issue and the transfer issues. Students will need to have assigned seats, and attendance will need to be taken before everyone leaves the bus in the morning and before leaving the school in the afternoon. And this is for contact tracing. Temperatures of the students will need to be taken before the student goes into the school. There are several choices, as previously stated, to include taking temperatures as they enter the bus. And if this is done, a monitor will be required so the driver can continue to watch the road and other students. Hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer will need to be given to all students as they enter the bus. This can also be done by a monitor. The hand sanitizer station may be mounted, but there is not one good place to mount it. We are still working on locations for this. There's different size pumps that are available. We're continuing to work with manufacturers and dealers regarding what may be best for the school bus. However, during the summer and fall, when it's hot, it is not recommended to leave hand sanitizer on the bus due to its flammability. Number of students on the bus. The number of students on the bus is going to depend on the prevalence of COVID-19 in your communities. It will be important for districts to discuss with their health department to determine if full loads are acceptable. We have charts available for 2/3 capacity to 10% capacity. And of course, we also have the 100% capacity if it is utilized by a district. A district may determine that it's safer to load a 66 passenger bus at 2/3 capacity, which is about 40 passengers if they're leaving the front 2 seats open for potentially 6 students. With any scenario, we do not recommend leaving students at the bus stop if they have a temperature, unless the parent has been contacted and doing so has been approved. It's much safer to take the student to school versus leaving them alone. Each district will need to create a contact plan and procedures to address these issues. Lastly, we've provided employee considerations. Ventilation. Ventilation systems need to be operating properly. And to increase circulation of outdoor air as much as possible, we're asking bus drivers to open the windows on the roof hatches to the degree recommended by the DPH, or Department for Public Health. We ask that they do not open windows and roof hatches if they pose a safety or health risk, and that is especially for those who might have asthma or allergies. So they may be put to the front of the bus when necessary with those windows closed. And then the employee safety considerations. Temperature checks for all employees should be done daily. Even if a driver starts from home, they should take their temperature and inform their leadership if they have a temperature above 100.4. They must wear a mask or a face shield when on the bus. And for those who are unable to do so, it will be up to the district to determine if the route that they're on is acceptable without a mask. The district is going to be aware if there are immune deficient students on the driver's route and may determine to give them another route instead to keep the students and the driver safe. Drivers should wear nitrile disposable gloves when assisting students. In between routes and at the end of the day, the buses need to be cleaned. Each manufacturer has provided cleaning guidelines for buses. The high-touch areas and any used seats should be cleaned. This may require additional staff between routes. Each school may have someone that goes through and cleanse each bus with the driver. They can start at opposite ends of the bus and work their way to the middle. And this will decrease the time that's needed at the school, and they can get on to their next route. In the garage, employees need to enter through one door and exit through another to the extent possible. So social distancing should be adhered to just like in the school, and shared tools should be cleaned between use. At the end of the day, surfaces should be cleaned as well. Anytime a technician goes into the bus, they should be wearing a mask and cleaning the area that they are in when they enter and when they leave. Face masks should be worn in the garage anytime social distancing is not adhered to. And driver barriers, we get this question a lot. They are not approved for school buses at this time. There's a task force by several pupil transportation organizations that have been in contact with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and manufacturers that are working on possible solutions for the future, but right now we don't have a solution to this. Now let's go over the appendix items. There is a sample survey here that you can utilize to send to parents, and some districts have already done this and others are in the process of working on it. You may add or take away any questions that are on here to your survey. If you scroll down a little bit further, we have temperature check chart. This is what we utilize at the state level anytime we go into into our building. And so each day we put down the date and we let them know if we have any of the symptoms. If we have a symptom, we're not allowed to go into the building. If you scroll down a little bit further, this is a bus manifest. This is something that needs to be done every single day, and you may determine that turning it into each of your schools is the best way to maintain those charts. Because of contact tracing, each student's name needs to be in each area that they're sitting in, and if they're not there, it needs to be notated that they are not there, so that if on any given day contact tracing is necessary, they can go back to the date and see who was on the bus on that day and who may need to self-isolate. Now, I will be joining a meeting this afternoon with transportation directors immediately following this meeting. That's coordinated by the Kentucky Association for Pupil Transportation and the Student Transportation Association of Kentucky, and they'll be doing this weekly. So please reach out to your transportation directors. If you're unsure of something, they can always bring it to this meeting or always bring it directly to me, and we will discuss any of the issues as well. And at this time, we'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Elisa. Again, questions, concerns, what did we miss? Is there anything that jumps out at you in terms of pupil transportation relative to your particular building operation?
And again, just to reiterate, our guiding question was, what concerns do you have relative to the transportation of students? So please use this time to share those concerns. Okay. Well, we'll move to the next part, the guidance on safety expectations and best practices for Kentucky schools K through 12. This is a question and answer time, and I'm not sure, Commissioner Brown, if Dr. White is on. It doesn't look like she's in the meeting at this time.
I play a doctor on TV, so I'm happy to try to fill in for Dr. White. I feel like I know more than I did at least 3 or 4 months ago, so we can try.
Yeah, Kevin, this is Kay. I'm also available. I would like just to mention that the document that we refer to as our flagship document is on the guidance page as well. They did a really nice job making a really great user-friendly document, and essentially laid out in a manner I think families can even appreciate what the expectations are versus best practices, and the recommendations that they've made to keeping students and staff as safe as possible.
Thank you for sharing that.
Jenny, this is Melanie Irwin. I have a question. In regards to requiring documentation, if we should have a student or staff member that becomes positive or has a positive test, can we require that we receive written notification that they have completed 2 negative tests and therefore considered recovered? And can we require documentation in regards to isolation periods, that they are no longer required or recommended that their period of isolation is concluded?
So this is Kay. Again, the protocol for the health department to actually release a person, whether it's a student or a staff member who has actually tested positive and is no longer exhibiting symptoms, does have some time frames around it, and we're actually going to include some information about how the contact tracing will work and what that implies for isolation. But the fact, can you require sort of that return to work note, I think is what you're referring to. Again, that's in your district policy, and how you want to treat that, I think should be, I don't think there's a statewide mandate or requirement, but certainly you could address that in your local policy.
See, Michael Kelly, I see a hand raised. Did you have a question?
Yeah, Mike Kelly from Valley High School, Louisville. I've heard a lot about the contact tracing. I'm just trying to get a good feel for what it actually looks like once we have a confirmed case, whether it's on a bus or in a classroom, the set of dominoes that kind of come along with that.
That's a great question. And as you saw with the bus presentation, we have that passenger manifest, where, even though attendance is going to be treated a little bit differently this year in terms of funding, we do need to know, what students are in which classes and where they're sitting. There needs to be, assigned seating. So my understanding, and I've not been to contact tracing school, but my understanding is that once the health department is notified that there is a positive case, then the contact tracing will kick in, and the school responsibility is really about where has that student been, who have they been in contact with, what's the proximity of that student to other students, because there are different levels of risk that may consequently result in a group of students or even a classroom of students who may need to isolate for a period of time, and not the entire building, and certainly not the entire district. So the purpose of contact tracing is to do an investigation on who the positive person has been in close contact with, for what period of time, and under what circumstances, so that then they can determine who is at the greatest risk, and how that sort of ripples out, as you, to use your word, I think that's a great word, how that ripples out to people who may be at less risk, and what the school's responsibility is, in my understanding, is to provide that attendance, the seating chart information, the location, the scheduling of that student or staff member, so that the contact tracers can then do their work. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you for your questions. What other questions might you have or concerns?
I would like to take this opportunity to talk about the role of the school nurse. You know, they had a full-time job before COVID hit, right? If you were lucky enough to have a school nurse, and maybe you're even sharing a nurse among, you know, several schools. It's important that you have the ability to involve other people to help monitor the health and safety of your building, and not assume, or not, I guess assume is the best word, that all of that can fall on the school nurse. That's a big lift. So any thought you can give to how to do the other monitoring, that's important. The other thing that I would like to mention is the ability to isolate students who may be exhibiting symptoms in your school before a parent can pick them up. And we touched on this a little bit in the bus conversation. If you've got a child, if you do have the ability to take temperature as they enter the bus, if you've got a child who is febrile, and normally you wouldn't have them at school, but there's, you know, you don't have an alternative, you need to carry that child to figure out how to contact the parent and get the child back home to determine the severity of those symptoms. So the ability to isolate that child and reduce exposure to other children, because you don't really know what's causing that fever. I mean, it could be an ear infection, it could be COVID-19, you just don't know. We certainly understand that, you know, space in most schools is at a premium, and the health room, if you're lucky enough to have one, you know, with a place that you can isolate a child is good, but there's other activities going on in that health room. It's a real problem, and certainly one that deserves a considerable amount of thought before you get kids back in the building. So just want to bring that up as something folks could think about.
Okay, along that same lines, my mind went to, what if you have a staff member, an adult that's, you know, showing signs, and having the ability or planning for isolating them as well, because that could be much more complicated, and something that you definitely want to be prepared for and not get hit with. Absolutely, and you know, one of the issues I think that's facing a lot of school districts coming up is the availability of subs. And I've seen on social media and some of the discussions about,
you know, people, retired teachers especially, are quite useful in that sub pool, and they're just not going to put themselves in that position this year, which really makes the challenge tough to get subs in there. But as much as possible, I would recommend that you know, try to follow your normal procedure. If you have a teacher who gets ill during the day, what do you do? If you have, you know, a staff member, I mean, and your school nurses, and you guys have dealt with infectious outbreaks before, whether it's the flu or the measles or the mumps or whatever, you know, as much as possible, you've got some protocol in place that you can fall back on to deal with those kind of situations. So hopefully you can build on that and you know, take that forward. I see another question in the chat box. Melanie, thank you. Will KDE be recommending any modification to high school graduation requirements for the upcoming year? So Kevin, I see you're still on. I'm not aware of the conversations at this point, but maybe you could talk to that question.
Yes, and I assume the question is regarding graduations that will occur in spring of 2021. You know, it's too early to see, to tell. We're hopeful that by that time we're beyond this as a world and as a country and a state, but we also thought we would be beyond it right now. We thought that in March, and we're not. So you know, if this continues and if there's no vaccine and we're still seeing cases in Kentucky, then I think it's just logical to know that there will be probably some restrictions on in-person graduations. However, you know, we're just going to have to wait and see. The waiver of the civics test, 22 credits, all of those things will be taken into consideration as the year goes on. There's discussion about potential waiver of the state assessment in 2021. That's something that Dr. Glass, the new commissioner, will be making a decision on whether or not to seek waiver from the federal government. Only one state, to my knowledge, has requested a waiver of the 2021 accountability assessment accountability. That's not yet been granted by U.S. Department of Education. As I stated yesterday on a call with the superintendents, if we do get a waiver for spring 2021 testing, my personal belief is that the federal government and U.S. Department of Ed will likely require something in return, meaning we are going to have to probably show what we are doing in lieu of high stakes state testing. What are we doing at the local level consistently for formative testing to ensure we're gauging where students are so we can deliver appropriate educational services to them. I know most districts and schools and teachers are already doing some form of evaluation like that, but any waiver this year will probably have some strings attached to it, and rightly so. So it's just too early to tell whether that will happen, but all of that will certainly be under consideration, I'm sure, if we stay in a similar COVID case situation as we're in now. Of course, we're hoping that we're going to get out of this and at least plateau, that some of that can be eased, but still too early to tell on those questions there in the chat. Long answer from me without giving you any answers.
All right. Are there any more responses to the guiding questions from today? Okay. So I will provide information to you from Dr. White. She was inadvertently left off of the invitation for today's event. So I will get the information from her, as well as share a link from you from the Teachers Advisory Council, where she presented with her as well. for that group as well. So I'll provide you with that link with the minute that you go to hear her talk to that group as well. So if there are no other questions, we'll stay on, of course, just for a few more moments in case there are.
Jenny, I have a question. Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And this one may be difficult to answer, and I almost hate to ask it, but I can't let us get off here without. With cases on the rise at the state level, I know we're in a very difficult week, and the same is true for our local area. We're seeing more cases than we have the entire time. I guess, what is the probability that we're even going to be allowed to return to school for face-to-face instruction? I feel like that's what we're feeling here. We're 3 weeks away from our start date, and we are planning for that. But at the same time, I think there is some belief in our community that there's no way the governor will allow us to return. And I know, a week or so ago when he tightened down on the mask mandate, that he said it was in hopes that we would get to return to school, that was kind of our hope. And we've just not seen the results from that yet. So I guess my question is, at what timeline or how much time do we feel like we might have to make, because right now we're working diligently to prepare for face-to-face instruction. How much time do we think we might have to switch gears and say, okay, that's not going to happen. The governor's not going to allow that. So we will start virtually. Just because, I guess, and I know we switched in a matter of a few days back in March, but I feel like we could have a better plan if we had a week or 2 weeks to make that switch. So any guidance on that? And I know that's a very difficult question to answer.
I can take this one. Thank you for that. I think that's on everyone's mind. Unfortunately, I don't think there is an answer to that. As you indicated, I think you probably heard the governor say this on the press conference over the last few days. The mask mandate is, we are all keeping our fingers crossed that is going to produce some reduction in cases. We're just now, I think, approaching that 2-week mark where we might see that help us out. We just don't know that. And so the governor has said publicly, he's also talked to me privately, that we are really hoping that will help bring the number of cases back down. I think the cases we're seeing now, the spike that you saw over the weekend and the one yesterday, I think the top 2 highest cases, that's probably a result of the July, 4th of July, folks being out, traveling, those types of things. So in a similar timeline, we're hoping that the mask mandate, which anecdotally, I'm seeing more masks being worn, and I think the governor has said he has observed the same, and looking on social media, et cetera. And so to answer your question about how much time you're going to get, we understand, and when we're talking to the governor's office and public health, that time is important and being able to plan, but also along the way, we've been advising superintendents that you need to be ready to pivot quickly, because even in just a local district, you could have a spike of cases that maybe does not exist outside your even your school attendance boundary. Maybe it's even located there in one little local community, and have to pivot over to going to all NTI for even a school. Of course, if a student is identified and a class has to be quarantined, a class may have to pivot to that quickly while the entire school remains in person. So there's not an easy answer to your question, other than that we are aware that the more time you have to prepare, the better. You could get a recommendation from the governor or from public health if it's really an isolated event, that you needed to do something within 24 hours. Ideally, if we were going into another statewide type situation like we did in the spring, the governor and we tried to make sure we had at least a few days of time to make that switch. We have the benefit now of having the summer to plan for that, where in the past we didn't. So here's another time where I'm taking a long time to say I don't have an answer for you, other than that we're aware the more time you have to plan, the better. However, plans should already be in place, or you should be working on them as a district and as a team in your schools, because we know that there is a likely probability that you will have to switch to one or a different form of instruction at some point during the year. And we know we already have districts making plans to begin the year with complete NTI, at least for the first 6 weeks or so. Jefferson County, I believe Marshall County, and there have been others. Others are still taking a wait and see approach with plans to start back full in person, but also knowing that they may pull back on that, and then the hybrid options in between.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer.
It's okay. I knew that I wasn't probably going to get we'll make a decision by August 1st, but I just felt like I needed to ask it on everybody's mind.
Now, if we keep seeing cases go up and up and up, and we're seeing that the increased mask usage, et cetera, is not working, then to me, that's leading towards more of a potential statewide solution. But we know we also have more tools available to us now than we did in the spring, with contact tracing, increased testing, that we can be more surgical where these cases are, and make decisions more regionally or even locally. And that's the first desire.
Thank you for your questions. What additional questions might you have, or concerns that are on your mind about the start of school for this upcoming year? I see Melanie has raised her hand.
Wondering if we could get some guidance in regarding teacher evaluations for the upcoming year. Is there any guidance in regards to best practices? Will there be a waiver put in place again? Just really like to have something moving in, because I know last year we wasn't necessarily able to complete our evaluation process, and there was guidance put into that. I was wondering if that would be available again for this year.
So I know that Todd Davis is on as well, so he might be able to address that question as well. Todd?
So yeah, and I'm actually going to defer to Kevin on this one, because this one I would obviously either take an executive order or legislative action. So as of right now, I know the plan is to continue moving forward, but have received several questions in this regard. But I don't know, Kevin, do you have any information you might be able to share?
I don't. That's something that's on the list of things to look into. I know that the year's quickly approaching, but feedback from this group as to challenges that it would present to you doing evaluations in hybrid virtual models, potentially going back and forth the rest of the year, would be very welcome. And I am going to have to jump off. I've got a 11:30 that I'm late for. So Todd, if you can take back that feedback, and then we
Sure.
can discuss that with Rob on next steps.
Absolutely. So I will add to the group to the conversation that some districts have addressed in their CEP that they've submitted with the changes for PCEL. So they've adjusted some of their plans to allow for some virtual observations and so forth around those aspects. But for the most part, most plans didn't change in that respect. So doesn't necessarily mean that there's not flexibility in your current plan to allow for some of those practices, but obviously we would recommend you review that CEP just to see what's allowed at this point. And then obviously if there whatever concerns you have, limitations, barriers as far as evaluations, observations, all those pieces, you know, regarding all the different possible options that districts are facing as far as the reentry this fall, then we definitely want to bring those forth for Kevin and the legal department to consider, to work with the Lieutenant Governor's office as well.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yeah, does anybody, I mean, are there any specific questions related to evaluation you might have?
I think in regards to timeframes, that would be something that would be a question, and also the virtual option, and just best practices out to, as to how to conduct those with a pandemic and teachers on virtual formats, hybrid formats. Just that guidance would be fantastic.
So I think we can work with Jenny and the rest of the P3 team to maybe put some guidance together on what some best practices may look like and provide that. I know we talked about several of those things in our virtual office hours around PSAIL, and then the changes back in the spring. So we can potentially pull some of that information and work with that. Some challenges we would face with some of the guidance is that some of it's very specific within your procedures outlined in your CEP. So as far as the virtual and so forth and what that allows. So that could get a little tricky at this point, depending on what happens in the future. As far as timelines, most districts have, again, I'll refer you back to your CEP, but most districts have put some type of a clause in there that based on situations that may occur through the year, that timelines may be adjusted. So that would give you some flexibility. I know a great deal of districts included that, even back from PGS days. And so they've left that language in there just to adjust some of the timelines based on need.
And also our P3 team, the Principal Partnership Project team, has been working with the Office of Educational Technology, OET, in already having those conversations about gathering information about best practices for virtual teaching and learning. So we are working to provide that. Okay, if there are no further questions, and before I ask for a motion for adjournment, please notice the 2021 meeting dates. Our next meeting will take place on October 8th, 2020. You'll receive more information about that as that date approaches, as far as timeline, whether that will be face-to-face or virtual. We also definitely, as Commissioner Brown stated, we definitely value your feedback. There is an exit slip, and Paul will provide the link in the chat for that exit slip. You can also find the link within this slide deck on our work site, our PrAC work site. We value that feedback, and that feedback is shared with the admin team at KDE. So please give us your information. We want to make these meetings as informational as possible for you, and information that is useful to you and that you can provide feedback on, as Commissioner Brown stated. It will also provide you with another opportunity for feedback on today's meeting, and any additional feedback you might have, actionable feedback around the guidance that you received today. We definitely appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us today. And at this time, I will ask for a motion to adjourn if there are no further questions or comments.
This is Toya Roby. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And do we need a second? Thank you, Toya.
This is Kim Rice. I'm make the second to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. So at this time, silence will indicate that you agree for the adjournment. And if you have any questions or comments, continue to use the chat box even after the meeting has concluded. Thank you again for your attendance. We appreciate your service in this capacity. Thank you.